Hi, y'all. Welcome to Solid Rock. Tonight we're gonna try to be fast. If you're commenting, comment fast. Anybody in the room who's speaking, just don't. We don't have time for that. Because chapter 18 has so much in it. We've got Jesus arrested and tried before the high priest, and then betrayed by Peter or denied by Peter, however you want to call it, and then tried before Pilate. This is all in chapter 18. I don't know who came up with the chapter breaks, but this one's too long. So let's pray and get going. Lord, I thank you once again. I just thank you so much for your word, for having this, that it's so accessible to us, that it's like it's not at all a challenge for us. We're not having to do it in secret. For crying out loud, we're broadcasting it to the internet. I thank you for the ability to do this and for the ability to share and connect with people who can't even be with us in the room. And I pray that you will speak across the miles and across the years and guide us in your word. Show us what you have for us today. Amen.
Amen. Well, as much as he said about us being able to communicate properly, there are some words in here I might not pronounce right. So we're going to just go with what I say and pretend that's the way it is.
Just fast and confident.
That's right. After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Sorry, I'm already messing up. Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. Leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now, with blazing torches and lanterns and weapons, they all arrived. They all arrived. I've already lost my place at the olive grove. Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him, so he stepped forward to meet them. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. "Jesus the Nazarene," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. As Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more, he asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And again, they replied, "Jesus, the Nazarene." "I told you that I am he," Jesus said. "And since I am the one you want, let these others go." He did this to fulfill his own statement. "I did not lose a single one of those who he gave me. Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Matthias, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering of the Father that has given me?" So the soldiers, their commanding officers, and the temple guards arrested Jesus and tied him up. First, they took him to again, I'm going to mispronounce this stuff. We're going to roll with it. The father-in-law of Caiaphas. See, I can't. This is not a good chapter for
me. You want me to pick up and go?
Sure.
All right.
I'm going to mess it up.
They took him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. This was the same Caiaphas who had told the Jewish leaders, "It is better if one person dies for the people." Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. That disciple knew the high priest, and he followed Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest's house. Peter stayed outside near the gate, but the other disciple came back out and spoke to the girl at the gate. She let Peter go in, but asked him, "Aren't you one of that man's followers?" "No, I'm not," Peter answered. It was cold, and the servants and temple police had made a charcoal fire. They were warming themselves around it when Peter went over and stood near the fire to warm himself. The high priest questioned Jesus about his followers and his teaching, but Jesus told him, "I've spoken freely in front of everyone, and I've always taught in our meeting places and in the temple where all of our people come together. I've not said anything in secret. Why are you questioning me? Why don't you ask the people who heard me? They know what I've said." As soon as Jesus said this, one of the temple police hit him and said, "That's no way to talk to the high priest." Jesus answered, "If I've done something wrong, say so. But if not, why did you hit me?" Jesus was still tied up, and Annas sent him to Caiaphas the high priest. While Simon Peter was standing there warming himself, someone asked him, "Aren't you one of Jesus' followers?" Again, Peter denied it and said, "No, I'm not." One of the high priest's servants was there. He was a relative of the servant whose ear Peter had cut off, and he asked, "Didn't I see you in the garden with that man?" Once more, Peter denied it, and right then a rooster crowed. It was early in the morning when Jesus was taken from Caiaphas to the building where the Roman governor stayed. But the crowd waited outside. Any of them who had gone inside would have become unclean and would not be allowed to eat the Passover meal. Pilate came out and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They answered, "He's a criminal. That's why we brought him to you." Pilate told them, Take him and judge him by your own laws." The crowd replied, "We are not allowed to put anyone to death." And so what Jesus said about his death would soon come true. Pilate then went back inside. He called Jesus over and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or did someone tell you about me?" "You know I'm not a Jew," Pilate said. "Your own people and the chief priests brought you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom doesn't belong to this world. If it did, my followers would have fought to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. No, my kingdom doesn't belong to this world." "So you are a king," Pilate replied. "You're saying that I'm a king," Jesus told him. "I was born into this world to tell about the truth, and everyone who belongs to the truth knows my voice." Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" Pilate went back out and said, "I don't find this man guilty of anything. And since I usually set a prisoner free for you at Passover, would you like for me to free the king of the Jews?" They shouted, "No, not him. We want Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a terrorist, which is an interesting translation for this one to use.
I was about to say, that they get to the point there. Mine says revolutionary.
Yeah, I think this is the very end of the chapter, but I believe the word, like the closest thing we have is like insurrectionist. He's someone who had like not only been
a violent
criminal
protester
and troublemaker, but he was specifically stirring up trouble against Rome, against the government. Yeah, he was a violent protester.
He was a violent protester. So, a very violent protester, like would kill and whatever.
Yeah, so, other stuff says he's a murderer. I don't think
that
anything
is interesting. Terrorist. What did you say? Robber and revolutionary. I love reading it this way just because of
yeah, the differences. If nothing else, just reading along in one thing while somebody's reading a different translation is eye-opening.
And it's so funny too, because it's not that I haven't read this 1,000 times. It's just the words I can't pronounce. In my head, I go through them, and they're just a name. that I say. But when I have to say it out loud, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to do that 3 times.
It's fine.
So.
All right. So let's dive into the notes.
Yeah.
So Jesus betrayed and arrested.
Mhm.
I like that in John's version of the story, Judas is like hardly mentioned. It's
He's
just
in the
like
background, just kind of.
yeah, that it's like, oh yeah, Judas knew this place and that's how he found us here because he had left before we came. But Judas knew this location. He knew there was a good chance of finding Jesus there.
They went there often.
And it's like, and they had sent Judas with, some guards, and it's how
Jesus
it was in there.
is coming when he knows they're going to find him. He's not bringing these people to a
But they
place where
carried
he's.
torches and lanterns and weapons.
It's a pitchfork.
Like, yeah, this is the angry villagers trying to storm the ogre's castle.
Yes.
And coming for Jesus, who, like, but yeah, I like that Judas like fades to the background and it's like Judas is the one that brought them, but John doesn't tell the story of like Judas coming up and like signaling them with a kiss and stuff. We know that from other gospels, but John doesn't bother. He like so minimizes Judas's participation. It's like, I'm not giving that guy spotlight.
But to me, it's almost not even not giving him a spotlight. In the other, gospels where it does say he kissed him, this is just saying, hey, to me, what I read here is he knew they were going to be there. He was making sure that they came in a place where they would find Jesus. But these guys, like you said, ogre castle storming, pitchforks, fire. You don't just walk up and kiss Jesus with a crowd of pitchforks and fire behind you and it be casual.
Yeah, this is not subtle.
So I feel as though some of the other gospels, when they talk about he came up and gave him a kiss, it was John. It's not as if he wasn't giving him a spotlight. It's as if he was saying that this was out of the ordinary and doesn't even need to. I don't know, because it doesn't track. If you think of the situation Judas is in, it does not track.
Right.
So yeah, let's get to these guys storming the castle. And the best part of it is we don't know how big of a group, but we know that it's like he's got Roman soldiers and temple police. And so like this is a large crew because the temple police would have been probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen. And they're adding Roman soldiers to it, and it's not like they add a Roman soldier. Basically, the Romans sent enough of their own people to keep those temple police in line.
Exactly.
And because they don't trust them because they're all Jews. And it's like, oh, the Jews that are arresting other Jews, we're going to be here to manage the whole thing.
Yes.
The Romans don't trust them. And so they're
on guard duty and hall monitoring.
There's like multiple, like not really working together squads of soldiers coming in this. And yet, if you read it, Jesus is completely in control. He's the one taking charge of the whole thing, which is just awesome.
Who are you looking for?
Yeah, like
he asks it so many
they
times.
walk up and it's like, who are you looking for? And they're like, oh, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, they've already had the thing. Judas has already come and identified him. They know this is who he is. But instead of just arresting him, instead of them showing authority, they're like timid and like, Jesus.
This is Captain Obvious 101 almost. It's like, who are you here for? And they're like, well, we think it's you. But we're going to describe him anyway.
And our English translations lose the awesomeness of it because when he responds and says, I'm Jesus, or says, I am he, and different things in your translation, what he says is, I am. He says the name of God. And they fall down. Like there's a crowd with weapons and torches coming at him. Like, we're looking for Jesus, and he says the name of God, and they literally fall to the ground. Yeah. And like he is so much in control of this.
Yeah, that's what my translation says. They drew back and fell to the ground.
Oh yeah.
So whether they were bowing willingly or whether they were crippled to their knees by the power of the Spirit.
I picture it like the movie where the car explodes and the person's
like
thrown.
Ducking.
And,
yeah, I can see that.
Like, it's like a shockwave goes off when he says the name.
But these are words, and you're talking about the significance of that being an explosion, and that would be the equivalent. If that's how they drew back, it's because those words were that.
It's like
damning.
In that instant, Jesus revealed himself as he truly is, and they couldn't deal.
You couldn't deny it anymore, I guess,
Yeah.
because he'd been revealing himself for so long. It's just this is the finale.
But it's like he pulled back, kind of like on the Mount of Transfiguration. It's like he pulled back the curtain, and for a second, it's just like Jesus in his power. And
That's
it
how
was more
I
than
feel
they could
about it.
take.
Because why are these pitchforks and fires and all of this army?
To be fair, the
crumbling.
Bible doesn't say pitchfork, but
That's what
it,
you
it,
kinda-
it's there in my brain.
I feel like mine pretty much says it. I'll have to find it. But
It
it's
says
not
torches, lanterns, and weapons. in
blazing
mine.
torches, lanterns, and weapons. I feel like the weapons, if they're not pitchforks, are probably a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than pitch. It's probably swords and spears and stuff because
Yeah.
these are like the police and the Roman guards.
Right.
So like they are well armed.
At least a sickle, the thing
But-
the Grim Reaper carries.
Yeah, I just did a quick Google lookup, like definition, like to draw back, and that to move away from someone or something, usually because you are surprised or frightened.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going by that translation, it says they drew back and fell to the ground. It's like they were
They didn't just draw back, though. They
startled.
fall
Then
to
they
the
fell to the
ground. That is the piece to me that words.
And so what's awesome is it just says Jesus asked again who you're looking for, and I hope he did it while they're
They
still
stole
on the
the
ground.
ground. I
Like
feel
he knocks them
did.
down and is like,
What
"Who
do you-
was it you're looking for?" Just for the record.
That's always
What's
But-
my name?
Yeah. That's always been how I read it because
But
he keeps saying it. Who are you looking for? And they do keep answering him, but they
Yeah.
almost keep bowing back. It's a
Mhm.
little more.
they told him again, "We're looking for Jesus." And once again, Jesus, completely in charge, says, "I already told you that's me." And it's like, "But if you're here for me, let them go." He's giving them orders.
Yes,
This is
you came
this
for
is the
me
police and the military against one person who's calmly giving them orders.
with no weapons, while they have
Yeah.
obviously something
Yeah.
more than weapons, and many of them. This is just such a power statement to me. This little passage shows the awesomeness of Jesus when you confront him and who he is.
hmm It's just the magnitude of who he really
Yeah.
is.
How does
Which
one
is-
person put an army on their knees with 3 words?
Which makes the next part so much funnier. You have to put it in that context to then realize we now have a groggy fisherman with a sword trying to defend the Son of God. Like-
I'm gonna get him.
And it's like,
I love that you described it like that because that just helps you really see it for what it is. Like, no, this is
because we know from other gospels, he was just asleep. He
They
is
woke
half
up
awake.
to this.
he
Yeah.
was asleep, and basically talk about them being, they drew back, they were startled. He was startled awake
hmm
at the time that they were drawing
Hmm.
back, and so it's like what the best that we can put into context is like if you're startled awake in the middle of the night and there's a threat, or you perceive.
Didi will come up swinging.
I come up swinging.
She,
I've never thought about this that way. That is a beautiful way to think about this. Even though there's an army, he doesn't look around to see if there's an army. He doesn't even notice they're on the knees. He just comes.
jumps to on the defense.
I've
Mhm.
never seen that.
because keep in mind, a couple chapters ago, Peter had just told Jesus, like, "I'm willing to die for you," and he really is.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Honest about that. He's-
Peter's not well educated, but I'm pretty sure he can count higher than one. He knows he's outnumbered by this group of police and military. He knows the Romans can kill him at will without facing any repercussions,
Mm-hmm.
and he's coming out swinging.
He's ready to swing
Like-
the sword and ask questions later.
Yes,
apparently.
and he wakes up to that
Yes.
immediately, jumping
Yes.
into that situation. So you don't have time to think. This is who
Clearly
are
he did
you
not.
really? But then it's what we're getting ahead of ourselves to
Yeah.
talk about the denial. But it's not even a few sentences later that he's like, I didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah, but well, because that's when he has time to think, and things are slower, and he gets scared.
Ah.
But when this kind of reveals who he really is on the inside, that it's like when it was just instantaneous reaction
Your knee
before you
jerk.
can think about it, his knee-jerk reaction was to spring to
and
and
just take
like
care of
risk
business.
his life to defend Jesus.
Actually that passionate about Jesus. He
Mhm.
really was, and this demonstrates.
But
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 when you overthink,
when it's calm and face to face and you're thinking about it, it gets scary.
Well, one thing I've always read in this that I don't think I've ever even heard a preacher say, I almost in the first denial hear Peter in some way in his own mind protecting Jesus. He knows Jesus has been arrested. He knows he can't, because in his mind, he's sitting here going, how can I save him? How can we rescue this guy? How can we get him out of this? And so I have always fully believed he's convinced himself up until that rooster crows that he's doing the best thing for Jesus.
He's like in here as
he's
like as a spy. He's trying to sneak his way in.
Of it, and it's so. And
he's trying to do a rescue mission.
It's super.
And
it's super.
That's really cool. I've never heard that. Okay,
Yeah.
put a pin in that. We'll get there. So we already have, what does Jesus' calm and willing surrender tell us about his mission? And it tells us that he was in control.
Yes.
This is not like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And oh, Judas caused all this. Like, no, this was foretold. This is fulfilling prophecy.
It's verse 4. Jesus, therefore, knowing everything that would happen to him, went forward.
Yep.
Stepped
he
into
was
it.
In charge. He stepped into what he knew.
Time's come.
God's will.
Let's do this.
So they arrest Jesus and they take him to Annas and Caiaphas. Just to clear up a little bit of nerd fun for you, Annas and Caiaphas are kind of both high priests.
Right.
They both have hard names to pronounce.
Annas was like the former high priest, but he was actually the real high priest. And it was Caiaphas was his son-in-law, who, when the Romans came in and took over everything, they sort of edged out Annas and they put Caiaphas in. So he's like the political high priest. He's like,
it's the queen and the prime minister.
Kind of.
He's
Caiaphas is officially the high priest, but Annas is the one that all of like the Pharisees and religious leaders actually look to, because he was the one who was supposed to be high priest, but Caiaphas got shoved in there. And so they're doing this sort of like dual priesthood thing going on.
But it's almost for accolades and honor more than it is for. That's the way I haven't studied that very, very thoroughly. I feel like you know a lot more about it than I do.
It's just like.
But he was more of the old guy who was symbol and is still going to be there on the throne until he's just gone. And
Annas is very much the patriarch who's still there. Caiaphas is the one who's like officially has the job. Mm-hmm. He's the one that we saw a little bit ago, and it John even calls it out here that this is the same Caiaphas who had told the Jews it's better if one person dies for the people. Mm-hmm. And back when we saw that happen, he pointed out that it's like, because he was high priest that year, like the Holy Spirit spoke through him just as a result of his office. And so, but what goes unsaid here is that they're bringing him to Annas and Caiaphas, and we see that he's tied up because he was arrested and tied him up. And then a little bit later when he's getting questioned and the guy slaps him and it says he's still tied up. So the guy hit him while he's tied up, which they're not allowed to do. That's against their law.
Yeah. Well, it's a punk move too.
But
if you're going to punch a guy when he's literally tied up, that is basically saying, I know I'm weaker than you. I know I could never do this if your hands were untied and you could come at me.
It's a bully move.
Here's my punch shot.
But this is an illegal trial. They're not allowed to have a trial at night. But this is exactly what's going on. And that's probably why they take him to Annas's house, not to Caiaphas. Because if you go to Caiaphas, it's an official trial, and they're not allowed to do that. And so this is all the hair-splitting kind of stuff of like how they do, well, you can't work on the Sabbath, but I do this thing. I
never thought that part through.
They take him to Annas because it's like, oh, we're just going to this guy's house and pretending it's not a real trial, even though what they're doing is completely trying him.
Yes,
under
absolutely.
their law.
In fact, that gets clearly acknowledged later, but we're not there yet.
And so that's why this is at Annas's house. This is not at the temple. This is
So they basically arrested him and took him into a holding cell that wasn't even official, so that they could go around their law and have someone else condemn him.
Clearly they had already condemned him because they had met together for a long time and been plotting to try to figure out how they could kill him. And they eventually, Judas came.
You don't come to him at this time of day to take him in custody if you plan on legally trying him, because their laws, the timing of it is so... It's so important.
What should have happened, they can arrest him at night, but they can't do the trial
Can't
until the
try.
next day.
Mhm.
But
They can arrest him, basically put him in holding.
but they take him and they're questioning him. But before you get to questioning, you get the first
Yeah.
piece of Peter showing up.
Mhm.
And John gives us these weird little details that it's like John knew these people. He knew Annas, apparently. Because just if anybody doesn't know, when it says, every time John talks about another disciple or this other disciple, that's himself. Everybody,
The disciple who
it is
Jesus loved.
universally, I've never seen any scholar ever disagree with that idea. John is talking about himself. He
In
just
the
won't
third
name himself.
person, yeah.
Funny.
But it's like, he specifically says that disciple knew the high priest and he followed Jesus into the courtyard and into the high priest's house. So it's like John, and so this is so weird because all of the disciples fled when Jesus was arrested, but John and Peter clearly followed at far enough of a distance to not attract attention. But this was clearly drawing a crowd because they were able to come in without it being super conspicuous.
Right.
So this was not like a subtle, quiet thing going on.
Nope.
But John just walks right in, realizes Peter's not in, and is like, "Oh, hey, he's with me." And they come in, and that's I've never heard your
I've always
idea,
thought
but
that
it makes so much sense
because he believed it in his mind. I'm doing the right thing.
It totally fits with Peter's personality and the kind of mentality that you see.
Yeah.
That for him to be like, okay, well, I gotta get in here,
Yes,
and
save him.
gonna figure out how to do it. He thinks this is Mission Impossible, and he's gonna figure this one out.
Peter really seems like an open thinker in this context.
The reason it seems this way to me is because of the rooster. Because Jesus calls the rooster, and the second that rooster crows, it's a realization for him. So how is it a realization if he hasn't really been thinking it through on a whole different lane?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like he was deliberately
he wasn't not
separating
thinking.
himself and denying him.
He wasn't not thinking through this, but the second that rooster crowed, he started thinking in another lane.
Oh man, we don't have time for this. You just opened up something huge.
I've always
this is a whole thing. I can go for an hour on this one.
Yeah,
this
it's
is
a lot.
how we rationalize our things, our choices, and the things we
Yes,
do.
yes.
That is, Jesus said, "You're going to deny you even know me." And Peter's
like, "No, I'm
probably not even
until
thinking that that's what he's doing, but he's literally doing that.
Yeah.
He's doing
But
it.
he has
I don't know
rationalized it to
him
himself that
because
it's like, oh, well, this is so that I can be here, so that I can do this, so that I can help Jesus. So
Well,
and
if
he
you look
completely
at where he
rationalizes it.
denies them, he denies them with the young girl. He would have to get past the young servant girl to get to this fire with these other soldiers. He's creeping to the fire with the other soldiers, which if you don't want to be in this situation, you don't sneak up to get warm by that fire. You just don't. That's just not where you go.
Yeah,
I feel like he's got this plan of action.
If you're scared for your life, you're not going to go stand there in the firelight next to the guards.
Yes, I'm going to warm myself.
Some of these same guards who were there in the garden when I cut the dude's ear off, someone's going to recognize me.
And they're like, "Oh, isn't that you?" Like, "No, it's not me." And he's still. I've always seen that.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, like, the Bible doesn't explicitly make that clear, but daggone, that looks right.
It's a little, when you really read it with the mindset of that's what's happening, it reads different.
It makes so much more sense that way.
Well, you know what I see here, and I'll try to be quick about this and we gotta move on. Just you see him almost like you said, he's in a whole different lane, but he's running with his plan.
Yes.
Not God's will. It's like Jesus told them. Jesus laid it out plain as day. This is the will of God. It must happen. It's gonna happen.
And he's still planning to fight it the whole way through.
And he still got his own plans in his head.
It's the same thing that happened the first time when he said it's going to happen, and he was like, "Oh, I'll be that far from you," and that's when you get thee behind me, Satan.
I've never really seen him as denying him as a fear thing. It's more of a I'm infiltrating because it's a step each time. He's going deeper each time. Why do you go deeper into something you're afraid of? He'd be running. He would have ran with the little girl who asked.
Where were you going?
I was just going to.
Sorry.
Quick, we gotta move on. He didn't. Basically, we do the same thing.
Oh
yeah.
God can spell things out to us. We'll even go to him and desperately ask God, "What is your will?" And he'll spell it out plain as day. And we're like, "You know what? I got a plan though, and we always assert our plan over his,
And we will convince ourselves that that plan was his plan.
and expect it to turn out well.
God bless this work I'm doing.
You said this would go well, and this isn't what you said at all.
Man,
18.
Sorry,
All right.
derailed.
no, this is it though. All right, so Peter's warming himself at the
Because
fire,
it was cold.
and so they start questioning Jesus, which, like we said, they're not really supposed to be doing.
Nope.
And Jesus, there's a lot of people, with your WWJD bracelet, let's just acknowledge that a snarky response is an option here, because
It's my favorite.
they're
part about
questioning him,
Jesus.
and he's like, "Been talking in the open to everybody. Ask them." Like, like, and lest you try to soften it and go, no, Jesus is respectful and stuff. Well, no, he was clearly disrespectful enough for the person to slap him for it. And
let's just look at this. It's like, I didn't stutter. I wasn't trying to hide. I've not been secretive.
Yeah,
I've said this to the world.
And how much is that?
Secret.
And how much is that just putting his thumb in their eye? He's like, I wasn't doing things in secret. Here we are at this nighttime trial that you've brought me to.
Exactly.
I'm not sneaking around.
And I can hear his voice projecting, and them pulling him away and taking him to Ananias' house quickly just to get the scene shut down, because they don't want it to go much further, because he is in control.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you questioning me? Ask the people who've been hearing me.
And you're the one who's saying these things. You're saying I did this. Okay.
But also, can we just acknowledge that he says, I have not said anything in secret. And yet we have just spent the last 3 chapters reading stuff that he said only with his 12 disciples. And it's so much teaching that doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's like, he has been, and he's like, I'm not saying anything in secret, but he has been teaching behind closed doors. And so you gotta figure that one out, or you need to just do what probably makes more sense and just trust him with it.
Well, is what he's teaching behind closed doors not what we try to replicate in the church with the discipleship of people who are close to you, as opposed to you pour more into the people who are with you,
and truly,
but he had not said it to anybody else.
It's not like he taught them like different ideas than he taught the crowd, but he did make it clear many times. And it's like, look, I talk to them in parables, and maybe someone gets it. I'm explaining it and revealing things to you. But it's like, it's this weird sort of hair-splitting thing, and you can look at it one way and it looks like Jesus is, borderline lying and deceiving them. But you can also look at it that it's like he has been teaching behind closed doors, unveiling way more than he told anybody out there. And so it's like, it's kind of a strange thing for him to say, I've been preaching openly. But what makes it make sense is everything that they're accusing him for is what he did super, super publicly.
Yes.
That's
like,
what I was
and he's like, you've seen it. You've heard people say it. I'm not denying it. Ask the people who told you, take their word. He's even saying you can trust them.
You're mad at me for healing on the Sabbath. You were there, and you were there, and you were there. You all saw me do it.
And your brother-in-law's cousin was the guy who got up. So
but it's like, I think that's what's going on. He's like, I know all the stuff that has your knickers in a twist, and none of that was done in secret.
Yeah.
Like,
and I really do think he is referencing the public speaking.
Yes.
He's not talking about when he was behind closed doors with the disciples.
Well, and behind closed doors is not.
I spoke openly to the world, and that speaking, just his choice of words there, when he was publicly addressing, and he even goes on to say, in the synagogue and in the temple, where the Jews always meet, and I said nothing in secret. So he's directly talking about his public speaking moments.
Yeah, I've come to the temple. We didn't hide in a corner and whisper in the.
No, he was standing up and teaching.
Yes.
I know we got to move on. There's so much here,
There is so much here.
So how does Jesus model integrity under unjust questioning?
Oh,
And it's like, it's this interesting thing because, like,
He's a shining example of
Well-
integrity. It's
and like we said, to the point that his honesty and transparency is actually pointing out and highlighting how much they're sneaking and severely bending the rules to even have this going on that they're questioning him.
Yeah.
it's
And
the I'm confused thing that I love to
just
do
kinda
because Jesus
keep-
is like, I'm
yeah.
confused. You saw me do this. Why are you
Mhm.
asking me at night when you shouldn't be asking me?
right.
I mean, you're
Which I love.
which one of the laws are you accusing me of breaking?
while you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the nonsense of that gets really highlighted when we get to Pilate. So
yes, I
Um,
love that part.
yeah, Jesus models integrity by not snapping back.
That's
Like,
what I was just gonna say.
They are baiting him into a fight.
They
That's
want
what
him
they're
to.
trying so hard to do. They want him to attack. They want him to rail at them and scream and swear, and he just won't do it.
Mhm.
And
They really want him to think about it.
even when the dude punches him, he's tied up and gets hit, and just looks at the guy and goes,
Yes.
"If I said something wrong, go ahead and tell me. But if
Can
not,
we-
what are you doing?"
Can we just
Like-
talk about how pissed off any one of us would be if that were our situation?
Yeah.
That alone would provoke. It's meant to provoke.
That's
Obviously, that's what we
for
just
sure.
said. But rightfully so. Your hands are tied. Everything that's going down is wrong. And you don't snap. You don't try to rush them because, keep in mind, he is surrendered to God's will.
And no matter
He's
how much of a
committed.
sense of justice you may have and how
It's
important
not-
right and wrong are to you, I assure you, Jesus' sense of justice is stronger than that. And he's there in the midst of this glaring injustice and just
Steps into it. Who are
Surrenders
you
and-
looking for? You know?
and just lets the guy, because it's Jesus. He didn't have to stay tied up. He could have
Yeah.
undone that effortlessly, but he doesn't.
Which, let's just use that for a quick moment and we'll move on to preach. To anybody that has experienced soul crushing injustice, I know that I have, and that's a story I can't get into right now. We have a Savior who came to earth as man, just like us, and you know what? He experienced it too. He knows what that's like. He knows what you're going through. He experienced pure injustice and took it. He took it. So you're not alone in that. We have a Savior that has walked in our shoes. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Because
And-
I find that incredibly helpful and it helps me find hope.
And it's important to note that, like, he didn't take it because he was too weak to stop it.
No.
He
No.
didn't take it because, like, any kind of timidity or anything, but he took it because he entrusted himself and the situation and all of it to his Father. And that's what he's modeling for us. And that's why, like, I like that the question was, how does he model integrity? That's what
That's
he's
how.
teaching us
Yeah.
in this.
Well, and it's so we look at just social media and how easy it is for us to get baited into a little comment or something into a
Sure.
little thing. And what this shows us is no matter how wrong they are, when we handle it with calmness, respect, and truth, they're going to look like idiots.
Yes.
They just are.
Yes.
When we don't lash back out, but we are calm, speak truth, and we do it respectfully, there's no argument from the other side because there's nothing to argue.
No.
It's blatant of who
Yeah.
is has the integrity. He doesn't have to.
Right. Which is part of why Proverbs is riddled with things saying, "Don't argue with the fool."
Yes.
Anyway.
Oh,
All right. So now to Peter denying Jesus, which I
Mm.
don't know about any of the rest of you, but I just dropped my microphone.
It's all good. Need a minute.
Um,
I
but
can
this is
fill in.
like been a total game changer, eye opener for me tonight, and the idea of Peter denying Jesus. Like,
Let me be clear. I've never heard any preacher say it. It's only
No,
just
me
something
neither.
I've read.
and
I've
but
never heard anybody
but
else
I'm pretty
say
sure
it.
you're right. And like,
It's a different
love-
way of looking at
I
it.
love the stuff like that. It's like, I've never heard anyone say this
Yes.
before, but I think this is what this says.
I really do believe that in Peter's own mind, the entire time he was moving forward with a plan, and he was justified in all of his denials, and he didn't even know he was doing it because his plan was in place, and he did whatever he had to do to get through.
This was a step to something. This wasn't denying Jesus.
He
This-
didn't run
this
away
wasn't-
from the little girl. He
Yeah.
stepped to that fire. He didn't run away from the fire. He stepped to the next.
But it was the rooster crow. They was like,
Oh,
oh my goodness, wait, what just happened?
It's like, that's what he said would happen, and
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I totally did that.
We
Wow.
do have a quick comment from
Yeah.
Ron. He said basically what we were just talking about earlier. He said Jesus stays calmly committed to the Father's plan.
yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's the calm. And how hard is it to remain calm in the face of just not just severe injustice, but brutality and pain and physical hurt and
It's
so much abuse. But but he's able to. That's the power of what he says, is that he doesn't need authority in his voice. He can speak it calmly and say,
And let me say that this is not a just because he's Jesus thing. There are records throughout Christian history of people facing injustice as much as this, and like being brutally martyred and all kinds of stuff. But because of the exact same Holy Spirit, the exact same trust in the exact same Father, able to face it like Jesus, which
Yeah.
says that we can do that.
right.
Like,
And that's what even in Matthew, it's 11:28-30. It's the verse that's, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. The word used there for rest, I can't remember, help me out. Is it Greek or Hebrew?
It's
I think
Greek.
It's Greek. Anapalo. And what it means is not sleep. It means a calm and patient expectation. And it's literally what Jesus is modeling to us here, that he is talking about in Matthew. And it's exactly what Ron said, you know,
calm
he stays
down.
calmly committed to the Father's plan. And if you know you have a good Father and he has a good plan, you can have a calm and patient expectation. You can have that kind of rest.
it also makes a big difference when you're focusing in light of eternity,
Yes.
because it's like, this is really awful for the next couple hours, but then we have
But for all of
eternity.
eternity. This is
And
just
it's like-
a speck,
So it's like,
and I can endure that.
yeah, this is really going to stink for a bit, but it will end. It'll be
For
over.
freedom.
Like- And it's, I mean, I've never done it, but it's like childbirth. Going into labor is gonna really suck for a little bit, but then it will end. It'll be over.
And when
And
it's
there's-
over, you do bear. I mean, you remember the pain, but it's not something you feel anymore.
No.
You do not feel that pain anymore. That pain might be remembered, but it is a forgotten memory. It is
Yeah.
gone. It is the love that you have.
And
That
now
is
you
what
have
you
a
hold.
reward for that
And
past
that-
pain. Very good. Where are we?
To
We're
the
at-
next section where he gets to the guards, which kind of solidifies my
yeah.
theory. I'm
And
saying.
so he's standing there warming himself,
yes,
which
yes.
I've heard so many sermons about this, and it's like, oh, the danger of warming yourself at the enemy's fire.
I think he
I don't-
had a plan. He was
Yeah,
there on purpose.
I don't think I've always thought that was a
Yeah.
weird point to try to bring out of it. But yeah, Peter's like, aren't you one of his followers? I've always thought it was strange that the one time it's like, oh, you must be because you're a Galilean, and it's like everyone in Galilee was following Jesus. Like,
But
like
if-
you're a
but if
Galilean, you must have been a
that's
follower.
True. Think of the magnitude of the situation, whether it's true or not true. If it's not true, he is insinuating, oh, well, we can assume that it is. But if it is true, that means that quite seriously, everyone in this region is following him, which of course you can't make blanket statements, but that's a huge deal.
Yeah,
Right.
to me, it feels more like this is a
Assumption.
cultural, this is a prejudice. Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you're one of them Galileans. I'll bet you're following Jesus. And
But the assumption of it speaks volumes to the power of what Jesus' ministry did.
oh yeah, and I think this is just comedic gold. I'm sorry that the last one who asked him, Peter's third denial, is a relative of the servant whose ear Peter had cut off. And it's like, if there's anybody who's like, hey,
I know you.
I've seen you. And
Yeah.
he's like, no.
Like, oh no, I know that.
But again, who are these people he's talking to? If it's a relative of the servants who came to get Jesus, he's trying to get closer to the people who came to get Jesus.
Yeah, he's working his way in.
Working his way in.
And it's
All right.
and I don't know how yours says it in
Yeah.
verse 27.
No,
But
he
it's
says
like, and
immediately. I
yeah,
got it underlined immediately.
right then a rooster crowed. And it's just that,
Yeah, mine says immediately.
and it's we don't have it here. I think it shows up in Mark. It might also show up in Luke, that when the rooster crows, Jesus turns and looks at Peter, which means Peter was close enough that he was like, could make eye contact with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's not
Like-
the guy who's running.
And so he's right there in the midst of things. Jesus, like the rooster crows, Jesus turns and makes eye contact with him. And yeah, I think you're right. It suddenly comes crashing in on
He's
him.
like, oh,
it's
my plan
not-
sucks.
it's not like he went like, oh no, I'm hiding. And the rooster went, oh, it's official now. And it's like, no, it like,
That's my cue. That's my cue.
it all came crashing in on him in that
Of
second.
the realization of what
That
he
it's
was
like-
doing.
I have totally done what he said I was going to do.
But
And
there's this thing behind it now. If it really is, like it was potentially, Ron said it, Peter was potentially working his own plan. And he also emphasized what we were just saying. We need to stay in God's plans and trust
Yes.
the outcome to him. So if that really was the case, it's twofold realization. It's,
Yes.
oh my goodness, I just did everything he said I was going to do. That's not what I intended.
Yeah.
I never intended to come against you.
This was my
Can you imagine the
difference
devastation?
in.
No wonder he,
Well, this is the difference to me in the betrayal of Judas and the betrayal of Peter, because Peter might have done it 3 times. Judas did it once. Yeah, he got paid, but Peter did it 3 times, and it's nowhere near as significant as what Judas did once. And so
because Judas truly
was.
denied him and
that's
betrayed
it.
him.
He absolutely betrayed. It wasn't just denial; it was betrayal on every level.
And like,
Whereas this is simply a denial.
Jesus predicts the denial, and then later on at the end of
There's nothing
at the end of John, he
betraying
comes back and
Jesus
kind of
in this.
resolves it. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It's never pointed out as betrayal.
There's not a betrayal.
Judas was
Not
the betrayal.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Interesting.
no, Peter, you're going to fall for this.
Well, I've
And
heard
like-
so many preachers speak to this
And it makes-
specifically as far as Peter. Oh, you can get forgiven because Peter was forgiven for 3 betrayals and Judas had. No, it's
Yeah.
not the same thing. And I'm not saying you can't get forgiven for the 3 versus the 1. Absolutely, Jesus can forgive everything, but that's not the context here.
we already hit on it before that, like, I firmly believe that Judas could have been forgiven if he would have come back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But so the rooster, and it like completely
Immediately.
rocks Peter's world.
Yeah.
What can we learn from Peter's failure and how it plays into God's bigger story? And I think the best thing is what Dee Dee has called out, that it's like we tend to run on our own plan. It's what
Yes.
Ron said too.
Yeah.
That the idea of is we need
I've got a
to
solution.
we've got to stay on God's plan. His plan is better than ours.
Yeah.
But we have this tendency that it's like when I'm trying to give my kid directions and he hears step 1 and goes running off. And it's like, there were 10
You
more
didn't have the rest
steps.
of the information.
Like
What
we have a
were you
page
gonna do?
worth of directions here and you've
That's
got one thing and you're
Good
going.
analogy
that's what we
for
do.
it, though, because Jesus has explained to them over and over, this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do, this is what's going to, I'm going to be taken. No, I'm not going to betray you.
Play
And
by play.
it is. And the fact that a rooster had to crow to get him to realize it,
Means he ran off half cocked on
he
his
was
own.
not. If the rooster crowing can give him realization, he did not realize there was a denial. He just didn't.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't see how
And
he
I
could
think
have been
that's-
intentionally denying and still had that moment of, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what have I
because
done?
Again, it's twofold. It's the rooster crowed, and that's when he boom. You see him kind of snap out of his thought process.
His plan and go into God's plan.
Then the second part, he locks eyes with Jesus, and that's the realization. I unintentionally betrayed you.
It's like he hears the
It's
rooster.
like, wait, what?
He hears the rooster and turns and looks at Jesus and sees that Jesus is looking back at him.
I love that y'all are already owning he unintentionally does it. I've never heard a preacher say it before ever, and I've just always read it that way.
I just feel sick to my stomach for him. I feel like I would throw up and pass out at it at that point.
Which is why Luke says he went out and wept bitterly.
I would.
And
it was a realization that he was not intent. I just don't see it as an intentional thing. But how often do we unintentionally represent Jesus incorrectly because we're not following his plan, we're following our own,
and we're convinced that the thing we're doing is going to be for the greater good. And it's like, oh, I make this compromise, but because that's going to get me to this point where I can do, and I can really make a difference for Jesus here. And it's like,
what can we learn from Peter's failure and how it plays into God's bigger story is exactly just, we have got to surrender and submit to God's will daily, minute by minute, second by second, because the moment we get off, we take that same exact path.
And we will 100% rationalize our idea.
And
I do not want to be in Peter's shoes.
Yeah.
Well, I think I said it.
The thought of it is just, like I said, I can literally feel sick to my stomach. I'm like, I do not ever, ever, ever want to actually experience that in this context. He thought what he was doing was right. He thought this was for the kingdom win.
Yep.
And how many of us Christians, myself included, are out here on mission for the kingdom win?
And we're ignoring what was going on and denying Jesus, sometimes not even representing Jesus.
Plans, running off half-cocked.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, I think, is what I have learned. It's very sobering and eye-opening, and it's crushing my soul just thinking about it.
Okay, well, let's try to cover this trial with Pilate.
This one's loaded all by itself.
A couple fun things. For a long time, people thought Pilate didn't exist, thought Pilate was not a real person until then we uncovered, I think it's called the Stone of Pilate. But it's a thing that not only confirmed Pilate as a person, but actually him holding this office that we're seeing him do. And because archaeology always proves the Bible, it has never once disproven it.
Science always proves God. If you want to follow the science, follow it.
Yes, please do.
Real science.
Yeah, we do not have time for that. Now, fun things that we've got to notice is, now it's at verse 28, it's early in the morning when Jesus was taken to Caiaphas. So this is confirming that all of this stuff has happened overnight.
Well, also, if you look at where they took him out of, I can't say his name, but I'm going to pronounce it badly. but to your point earlier, they took him to. How have you never seen that? They took him to a place where it was safe for them because he wasn't under this rule of trial. But in the morning, the very first thing they did before it could even be noted that they had taken him somewhere else, they brought him to where he would stand trial. It was sneaky from the beginning to the end.
They led him, yet they themselves did not enter.
Yeah,
so
and that's a piece that I love. So they wouldn't be defiled because entering this Gentile building would make them unclean, and they still want to be able to eat the Passover meal. Which,
but they sure do need these guys right now.
Which once again is just this totally hypocrisy, splitting hairs thing. And it's like, we just finished our illegal trial and we're figuring out how to murder this guy, but I don't want to be unclean for Passover.
Yeah, we got to eat dinner tonight, and my relatives will get upset.
If I walk through a Gentile doorway, that would be bad. But let's murder this dude. And
have you take the blame for it, because our laws won't justify it, so we're hoping yours will. Isn't it funny how you adapt to other people's laws so quickly when they work in your...
And I love so much. Pilate comes out and is like, doing what the governor should do, holding a legal trial, and says, all right, what are the charges? And they said, he's a criminal, so we brought him to you. Like,
He
Okay.
broke what laws did he break? Our laws.
no, it's like they don't even say he broke
No.
laws. It's just
Well,
it's like he's a criminal.
Yes, and but if there, it even references. I feel like Pilate coming back saying, "These are your laws. This is your,"
Hmm.
and they're saying, "Well, under our law, we can't do this." So whether they're saying he broke a law or not, they're acknowledging they need somebody else's laws to try this guy.
Yeah,
Right.
and we do forget it's one of the other gospels gives us more details on this, and
Um,
like what they accuse him of, what they start out just giving the nonsense, like, well, he's a bad man, you should kill him, and he's like, for what? And the charge they ultimately bring is that he has set himself up to be a king.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And
Which makes the next chapter so good. Anyway, sorry.
and it's that they're trying to make him a threat to Rome. Like, because if they come talking about blasphemy, Pilate doesn't give a rip about blasphemy because he doesn't care about their God. And so they come saying he's a threat to Rome. He's telling people not to pay taxes. He's telling them that he's the king and trying to get Rome to kill him. And yeah, it's we want him dead, but we don't want to get our hands dirty. So we're going to try to manipulate.
Yeah.
we want you to use your laws of judgment with our laws of rules.
Yeah. Well, Ron said he's like, they tried to make it legitimate in the daylight.
Yes,
Mhm.
They were
that's a
trying
very
to-
good point.
Yeah.
But like, there's
It's amazing what people
between-
can justify for themselves.
if you put the story together through all the gospels and get this trial with Pilate, you see Pilate kind of unraveling. That
Hmm.
he's actually terrified because that it's like it comes in and it's like, oh, he's a king, and he comes in and it's like, are you the king? I'm like, I've been hearing this stuff about the king of the Jews and stuff. Is that you? And he's
Just
like,
like you said,
what?
man.
Yeah, and it's like,
Your
if you say
words,
so.
not mine.
And
But,
it's
but
like,
what's
well,
interesting
no,
about him being
my
terrified?
kingdom is not of this world. And like the way Jesus talks freaks Pilate out. That it's the same stuff we were talking about.
Yeah.
He doesn't get riled up. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't defend himself. And he's way too calm. And he's just like, if you say so. My kingdom's not of this world. We would have defended, my fathers would have defended me if it was. He's like, oh, so you are king? He's like, nah, I mean, if that's what you want to say. Like,
But
I
this is
I
just
came
a
to
game
reveal
of
truth.
passing blame. It's
And-
the Jews going to Pilate, Pilate coming back to the group as a whole and saying, okay, you have to decide. No, I'm going to let you decide. Okay, well, it's just pushing the buck of who's going to command this. And
Right. I like what Ron said. He said, I feel they want Pilate to take the heat if the crowds get upset.
Yeah.
That's why they're trying to pass this off like,
They-
no.
They wanted to
you-
be like,
you
oh my
have
gosh,
to-
he was killed by the Romans.
yes,
Not by us.
Yeah. And also, just a brief side note. So the movie, The Passion of the Christ,
Mhm.
no,
how they portray, I think if my brain has it straight, I haven't seen it in a while, but how they portray Pilate, what you were just saying, that like how he's questioning Jesus. I love how they do it because there's definitely, you see this curiosity
Mm-hmm.
spark in him. Because like you said, he's like, becomes curious at how calm and matter of fact Jesus is. And you see, I love how the actor portrayed it, that you see
Yeah.
this questioning and this doubt arise in Pilate, like,
but if
Are
you
you-
look at the
really
authority
the story
of
of the next
Pilate,
chapter.
there
What do
is
you say?
no reason for him to have that question or doubt. It
Yeah.
has to be the power of who the presence of Jesus is, because anybody in the world could say those words calmly, and the governor of this part of the Roman Empire is not going to be like, yeah, I might be worried about that guy. This is a unique. When has he ever been worried about, should I really kill this prisoner?
yeah,
They
you
don't
saw
think
that
twice.
there.
It's off with their
Mhm.
heads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
It's interesting
Right.
to me that Jesus could spark fear, and not that Jesus could. That's the wrong way to say it. That the fact that Jesus did is a unique and unprecedented situation all by itself.
And just don't miss that this is like the first time, this is going to be a recurring theme over the next chapter. In verse 38, that Pilate went back out and said, I don't find this man guilty of anything.
Yeah.
We get over and over and over, like repeated assertions, this man is innocent.
I find no
Je-
guilt.
like,
at
Jesus,
all.
Not me. If you want to do this, this is on you guys.
but
he
like
did. He-
Jesus, but it's like we get from Pilate, we get from a centurion, we get from the thief on the cross, but it's like over and over and over. And it's like, this man has done no wrong. This man is not guilty. And it's that Jesus is not dying for his own anything. He's dying for us.
Well, to me, there's beauty in Barabbas too, because this is the terrorist, the violent protester, the person that all of the people can agree is evil.
Yeah.
And Jesus is taking his place very literally
Mhm.
in this. I mean, is one of the worst of humankind, and literally he's taking his place.
I mean, that takes us to our last question. Why do you think the people chose Barabbas over Jesus? And how does that reflect human nature?
Human nature is we can justify our actions as long as we want to believe in them passionately enough. We can find a way.
And it's that human nature is so very fickle, because the same crowd that was demanding Barabbas and killed
Yes.
Jesus is the crowd that 4 days ago was shouting Hosanna to the King.
Yes.
Like the crowd, and going back, you were talking about social media. It's like the crowd is frankly meaningless
Yeah.
because it'll change that quick.
Yes.
And
Yes. Be careful whose opinions you allow to justify your actions, because just because somebody agrees with you does not mean that their content or their context is valid in any way.
just because they're waving a palm branch and sounding Hosanna to the King doesn't mean they're
They're on
not
your
going to
team.
say,
Mhm.
crucify him, give us Barabbas.
That's
Doesn't
right.
mean they're the real deal. Wow. This was so
And
hard.
like that, to me, that's the reflection of human nature. There's a lot of stories that we're told that it's the religious leaders that are here trying to manipulate this and get Jesus killed are the ones that stir up the crowd to ask for Barabbas. There's an excellent chance that this crowd is there. Like this crowd showed up because
Two.
of this custom that Pilate always releases a prisoner. And probably a lot of this crowd came to ask for Barabbas in the first place.
Wow.
And it's just that Pilate, it tells us elsewhere, it might be in the next chapter, it might be in other gospels, but it says he knew darn well that it's the priests had handed Jesus over out of envy. He knew that this was a personal vendetta against him.
Wow.
And so Pilate, trying to stick it back in their eye, says, all right, I was released a prisoner. How about this King of the Jews? How about I give you Jesus?
Or this horrid,
And-
murderous, horrific person who's terrorized all your families.
Like,
But if Barabbas was an insurrectionist against Rome, most of the Jews didn't like Rome anyway, and they may well have seen him as a hero. Like, it's entirely possible that a bunch of those people who had come there early in the morning had come to ask for Barabbas in the... First, can we take 1 second to acknowledge how absurd it is for there to be a custom that's like, hey, every spring I let
Thank
one
you.
notorious prisoner just go free.
We're going to let one death row person
I'm glad
Go.
you circled back.
It's
I
like
want everybody to
we're just going to
vote.
do a raffle, and
I'm glad you circled back to that, because when you were reading it, that popped up in my head, but I'm like, no, I need to let him read and just get on. But I'm like, wait, because as you know, this is
The
tradition.
custom.
Yeah.
We're just going to release somebody because it's a
And we just
holiday.
talked about that, and like how we fast forward to now, like we have our, yes, it's wrong and it's weird and goofy and it's based out of wrong stuff. But our traditions are, the Easter Bunny and the egg hunt, but their tradition, whoa.
But-
What?
well, I mean, this is Passover. It's basically their Independence Day. So it would be if, like, every 4th of July,
We're going to represent freedom by letting the most horrible criminal you can find
it's
go.
like every 4th of July, the governor of your state picks one prisoner to just pardon and let him go.
You'd
What?
think that they would get them to act right towards that time of year, though. Prisoners were probably...
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
anyway,
That's just
there's
fascinating.
no meaning in this. There's no
No.
lesson to take from that. But it's weird.
It's definitely noteworthy. and weird.
It's yeah. But how
but-
often do we pardon things that we see and know are absolutely wrong and should not be happening, but we pretend to not see it, or we will pardon it in our eyes because of something else that is to us more important, or
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
for the same reason he was doing it. It's to keep the
To
peace.
keep the peace.
But
Which that is a whole other topic.
Yeah.
we
We
didn't even get through this,
So we
but
do
we
have-
did.
close.
We finished
We
it.
did. There's just one more comment. Ron said, "Wow, even the world acknowledged that Jesus lived a pure
Yes.
Yeah.
life."
Yeah,
Even
it's
the other
like the filthy
kingdoms,
pagan Roman governor
Pagan.
is like, this man. And
he's
then
fine.
later on, we're going to get a Roman centurion who says, surely this is the Son of God.
Yeah.
Well, and even if the people did want Barabbas, it is very clear in the other Gospels that the reason that Pilate chose Barabbas as the person to go against Jesus, he was like, surely they're not going to let this
Yeah,
guy
he was
out.
like, no one in the
He
right
was
mind
like,
would pick Barabbas.
okay, I got a solution. Not
Yeah.
going to be on my hands. And that just shows you how far people are willing to go to let the wrong
Which
thing
is,
live.
which is another one that's a great
and
scene in the
crucify
Passion
the
of the
truth.
Christ, that when Barabbas is released, and he comes out and he's like, oh, yeah, you picked me, and comes up to the, and it's the priest are like, you know, like, it's like, I don't actually want to have
We don't
anything to do with
actually
you,
want
but
him
we
free.
just wanted not
We
him.
want him dead.
Yeah.
I love Ron's last comment. He said, "Sounds like the presidential pardons."
Yeah.
What we were just talking about.
Yeah. Well, you know,
But
every
yeah,
culture has
I
their
think
own.
the big lesson from tonight comes from this whole different perspective of seeing Peter's denial, and that it's just how easy it is to rationalize things. How much sense things can make in our own minds.
In our own mind. That's the key word.
Until that moment when the rooster crows, when you get the phone call, when the person finds the stuff that you had hidden, whatever it is, when it comes crashing in on you, and all of a sudden you realize how far I have gone off track from what I was trying to do.
Well, and all it takes is just this little movement. He was
Mm-hmm.
going right with Jesus, and then he veered just a little bit into his own plan.
Yeah.
And how far did he go?
And I think it probably started when he woke up swinging a sword.
Yeah.
And
He was
because
following
he's
Jesus.
like,
he was
"No,
trying to get to him.
I am going to stop this from happening." And
If he had been denying him and afraid, he would have left when the little girl said it. He would not have kept following Jesus into that crowd.
no, he was trying to stop this from happening. And because we
I
know
love
that's
somebody
why,
agrees with me on this now.
we know that's why he came out swinging a sword.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, I don't know that we have time for this, but I just think I've been in that position. You've not swung a sword and lopped anybody's ear off, but you said, like, if I wake up startled in the middle of the night, I'm prepared to
throw a
defend.
punch.
I come up swinging. Probably because I was raised by my dad. I don't know. Makes no difference. But think about that. When you are startled awake and your fight or flight kicks in and you're running on adrenaline, think of that.
panic drowns thought.
Panic drowns thought. You're not thinking clearly.
That's beautiful.
But also, think about the trajectory of that day. If that's how you woke up, say you woke up to that reality, whatever. Usually, for me personally, I'm not in my right mind. Things are a little off. I'm a little jarred from the adrenaline, and it affects the rest of my day unless I pause and make time to recenter and refocus my thoughts towards God.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't do that, I'm still running off half-cocked off the adrenaline that woke me up for the day, being steered by my emotions and the direction those emotions took my thought. So I'm just looking at this in light of that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
No,
that's
I needed to hear it if nobody else did. I really did.
That's kind of how I see it. I've had those days when I woke up and I'm like, what do I need to do? And then once the dust settles, if I haven't reconnected and realigned with God, the rest of my day is going to start drifting off track.
Well,
and that's how you wind up at the end of the day, tucking yourself in bed going,
I got nothing done, but I'm exhausted.
Nothing done. I'm exhausted, and I really don't feel good about today. Like, one of our prayers is like something along the lines of "Help me live this day, so that I can offer it back as a gift to God." And if on days like that, if I didn't recenter and recalibrate that before God, it's like, oh, I went off track somewhere. Like, yeah, you probably started there and you never backed up.
You never recentered.
That's something I need to learn to do, because I will go not just days, but weeks and months. And it only takes just a
It's
little
so
bit off
easy.
path to get
So
so
easy.
far gone.
Yeah.
When you,
Anyway.
okay,
Sorry, that's
this was a good one.
Oh,
They're all good ones.
So it really comes back to, it's the sharp contrast between
mhm.
how Jesus and Peter are experiencing this night.
Mhm.
And Jesus is so calm and just trusting and
Yes.
knows what's about to happen. Peter doesn't quite
Panicked
fully
with a
grasp it.
plan.
Peter doesn't fully grasp what's going on. Jesus does, and he's calm. Peter is in a panic
With a plan.
and trying to improvise a plan to
Fight or
solve
flight.
this
Fight or
problem.
flight. He's still stuck in that mode.
And so what it comes down to, that's just from a couple of our questions, like how does Jesus model integrity under unjust questioning, and what can we learn from Peter's failure and how it plays into God's bigger story? Put those two together, and it's just that contrast of Jesus modeling how to go through the hardest situation, Peter showing us the human nature of how we go through the situations, and we're trying to fix it, we're trying to stop it, and we're going to come up with a plan, we're going to work around it until it falls apart and blows up in our face, and we suddenly realize what we've done.
Yep.
Wow.
And just like Peter, we'll see it in a few chapters. Stick with us. Keep coming back on Thursdays. You'll see Peter brought back. Peter, as of where we left it here, Peter disappears from the story.
But that means he dropped his plan and left.
Peter thinks it's all over, it's gone, and probably assumes, like, even when Jesus shows up again, probably assumes he wants nothing to do with Peter. And so the beauty of it is, no matter how much you've gone off track, no matter how much you've rationalized and tried to work your own plan, whether it has fallen apart or not, like, that same forgiveness that was there for Peter is there for you.
Amen.
And you are not big enough to ruin God's plan. Peter was here swinging a sword at the dude and trying to stop things. Peter is not powerful enough to stop this plan. You're not big enough to stop God's plan either. We can trust the Father, we can trust his plan, and we can move forward as unshakable as Jesus.
Amen.
We can have that same Holy Spirit can give us that same quiet strength and dignity, and just the trust of knowing he has this under control, and no matter what this is, it's temporary.
He had it solved before you knew it was a problem.
So, Lord, I just thank you for the peace that comes from you, from your presence, from the assurance of who you are, in the awesome magnitude of your power and glory, that nothing we come up against is a threat to you, is a shock to you, is surprising, that you know how this is all going, you know what you're doing with it, and you can and will use it for your glory and our good. And I pray that we can learn to trust you, learn how to take the blinders off that allow us to rationalize our actions, that let us think that, like, oh, we're doing this and it's getting us into a spot where we're going to do something, and instead to just trust you and let you guide each step of the way and show us the next step we can take to truly be in line with your plan, not our own. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all. We're a little over. Thanks for sticking with us.
It's all right. It was good. It was worth the extra time.
We'll see
We'll see you next week.